Hey there, this is Dustin Berger, one of the technology, privacy, security, and AI attorneys here at Dorsey and Whitney. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about dark patterns. Although they may sound spooky, these really are just ways that businesses use the user interfaces of their websites or mobile apps in ways that are seen as unfair to consumers. And sometimes this is referred to as an unfair kind of choice architecture, but in any event, it's also a very important topic right now. Even though historically speaking, there hasn't been much in the way of law that applies to how businesses design their websites and mobile apps, there is significant interest in regulators here in this country and outside this country in policing these dark patterns. And the Federal Trade Commission, in particular, has already been active in this area. So let's talk a little bit more about what dark patterns are, what action the Federal Trade Commission has taken against businesses that use dark patterns, and what the guidance is from regulators in Colorado and the European Union on dark patterns. So let's first talk a little bit about what dark patterns are. Here's a couple different definitions. First from the FTC, dark patterns are design practices used to manipulate users into making choices they would not otherwise have made, especially when seeking an individual's consent or agreement. And then under the California Consumer Privacy Act and the Colorado Privacy Act, with a similar definition, where a dark pattern means a user interface designed or manipulated with the substantial effect of subverting or impairing user autonomy, decision making, or choice. So overall, again, what we see is these are just different ways of saying that the choice architecture that's being presented is unfair. The Federal Trade Commission has been kind of the lead agency of the U.S. in terms of targeting dark patterns, particularly just in the commercial world. And although we're seeing, the U.S. states starting to take more interest in dark patterns, particularly as it relates to privacy, it certainly seems that the Federal Trade Commission and its state counterparts will continue to be major enforcement agencies for dark patterns going forward. In 2023, the Federal Trade Commission actually brought two enforcement actions that related to dark patterns that I thought would be interesting to take a look at. The first was against Amazon, and the complaint alleged that the company improperly used dark patterns to generate subscriptions to its Amazon Prime service. In its press release, the Federal Trade Commission says that Amazon has knowingly duped millions of consumers into unknowingly enrolling in Amazon Prime. Specifically, Amazon used manipulative, coercive, or deceptive user interface designs known as dark patterns to trick consumers into enrolling and to automatically renewing Prime subscriptions. Amazon also knowingly complicated the cancellation process for Prime subscribers who sought to end their membership. The primary purpose of its Prime cancellation process was not to enable subscribers to cancel, but to stop them. Amazon leadership slowed or rejected changes that would have made it easier for users to cancel Prime because those changes adversely affected Amazon's bottom line. Amazon tricked and trapped people into recurring subscriptions without their consent, not only frustrating users, but also costing them significant money, said FTC Chair Lina M. Khan. These manipulative tactics harm consumers and law-abiding businesses alike. The FTC will continue to vigorously protect Americans from dark patterns and other unfair or deceptive practices in digital markets. So I think we can see that FTC is both interested in this topic and willing to take on as large of a player in the market as Amazon. Shows, I think, some real serious commitment to taking action against dark patterns. The FTC actually filed a second lawsuit against Publishers Clearinghouse, the well-known sweepstakes company, and in that lawsuit alleged that the company used dark patterns to mislead to mislead customers about how to enter the sweepstakes, and to mislead individuals into thinking that making a purchase would increase their chance of winning. And the Publishers Clearinghouse settled that lawsuit, agreeing to pay $18.5 million to affected customers and to overhaul its user interface. So it's really clear that the stakes can be very high here, and that these enforcement agencies really are looking for these kinds of cases to make examples of companies that are using dark patterns. Switching gears a little bit now, I wanted to actually take a look at some dark pattern principles that are actually in Colorado's new Colorado Privacy Act rules, because Colorado is actually giving us a lot of guidance about how choice options should be presented so as to avoid creating dark patterns. And so there's a couple slides here just to run through all of them. First, as you can see here, choice options should be presented in a symmetrical way that doesn't impose unequal weight or focus on a particular option. Choice options should avoid emotionally manipulative language or visuals to unfairly, fraudulently, or deceptively steer a consumer's choice. Silence should not be taken as acceptance or consent. Options should not be presented with a pre-selected or default option, and consumers should be able to exercise any choice option with a similar number of steps. In addition, consumers' interaction should not be unnecessarily interrupted to request consent. Consent choice options should not include misleading statements, omissions, affirmative misstatements, or intentionally confusing language. And then these last two sort of relate to what we sort of think of as maybe accessibility considerations. First, the vulnerabilities or unique characteristics of a target audience of a product, service, or website should be considered when deciding how to present consent choice options, which could be especially significant whenever you have a website or mobile app that's known to target children. And user interface design and consent choice architecture should operate in a substantially similar manner when accessed through digital accessibility tools. Now, with the Colorado Privacy Act, these principles are primarily aimed at the kind of consent for privacy practices that's required under certain parts of the Colorado Privacy Act. But there's certainly, in terms of these principles, I think there's great overlap between what state and federal regulators may go after in sort of the the kind of cases as like Amazon and Publishers Clearinghouse we were looking at before, and how regulators will look at dark pattern principles in the privacy context. I thought it would be interesting to also look at the work the European Data Protection Board is doing on dark patterns. And again, this is more in the privacy context, but again, I think these principles are going to hold up, very well here in the United States as well as in Europe, and applied within the privacy context as well as other commercial contexts. The EDPB is taking sort of the reverse approach of Colorado, and they're telling us what not to do rather than what to do. But they've identified these 6 things: overloading, meaning overwhelming users with a large quantity of requests, information, options, or possibilities, particularly to prompt them to choose a preferred option; skipping, meaning designing the interface or experience in a way that causes users to forget or fail to consider all or certain aspects of a decision; stirring, appealing to the emotions of users or using visual nudges; hindering, obstructing or blocking users from becoming informed about the use of their data or exercising control of it by making certain actions hard or impossible to achieve; being fickle, designing the interface in an inconsistent and unclear manner that makes it difficult to navigate user controls or understand consequences; and leaving users in the dark, designing the interface to hide information or privacy controls, or to leave users uncertain about how their data is processed and how they can exercise control over it. So I really want to emphasize how important these dark pattern principles are going forward. I mean, first, they really are unprecedented in as much as generally, the law has never told us how we have to design user interfaces to websites and mobile apps. And so, for the first time, we see, these consumer protection authorities intervening in this space and insisting that, not on a particular design, but insisting on certain design principles. I also think, this evolving world of dark patterns is super important. It will become super important in the terms of service context. Most of our websites, mobile apps have some kind of terms of service. And I think we'll start to see some of the jurisprudence about how terms of service are enforceable or not, starting to really incorporate some of these same considerations about dark patterns in determining when website terms of service are indeed enforceable. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Certainly don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.